General Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone War. Now he begs you to help him in his struggle against the Empire. I regret that I am unable to present my father's request to you in person, but my ship has fallen under attack, and I'm afraid my mission to bring you to Alderaan has failed. I have placed information vital to the survival of the rebellion into the memory systems of this R2 unit. My father will know how to retrieve it. You must see this droid safely delivered to him on Alderaan. This is our most desperate hour. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
Right, let's not waste time beating around the bush and get right into this. So, we open the first episode with a prequel AMV, straight out of 2007. All it's missing is a Linkin Park song and a title card written in Comic Sans. So this lasts for about 4 minutes, right? 4 minutes of this entire episode are dedicated to this. As we're going to find out, this show is really padding for time. But the first 4 minutes? Seriously? If this is their best foot forward, then, well, you'll understand why I made this video. By the way, who needs this recap? Like, who's watching the Obi-Wan Kenobi show without having watched the prequels? And if it's really such a big concern that people might get lost, then why wasn't there a recap for Boba Fett? It makes you wonder if this intro is doing something a little bit more than just trying to recap the prequel. Like, maybe it's trying to remind you of the prequels and how you felt watching the prequels, and maybe it's trying to gain some of that feeling via association to the prequels. But just hold on to that thought for now. Right now, it's time to meet the Inquisitors, the main bad guys of this series. We have Funny Hat, Stereotype, and Race Swap. Allow me to explain. This guy has a funny hat. This woman is an angry black lady. And this guy is the wrong race. Now, hold up. I'm not trying to get political here, okay? I'm talking from a lore perspective. This guy, he's supposed to be a Pau'an. Now, these guys, these are the Pau'an from Revenge of the Sith. Now, if you look real closely, I know it's hard to spot, but you'll be able to see that there is a little difference between these two depictions. I mean, honestly, guys, this is a little bit racially insensitive. I mean, it's Pau'an face. Come on, this guy looks more like Pinhead than the Grand Inquisitor. Now, the great thing about Inquisitors is that they just love to explain things. All sorts of things. Like who they are, and why they're here, or what they do. Now, for a faction that's quite notorious, lore-wise, you'd think that they wouldn't need to do this. And you'd be right, they don't. They don't need to do this. So, why are they doing this? Well, I can tell you. It's because you need to know this. That's right. That's how low the writers think of you. They think you need everything explained to you, like you're some kind of wall-eyed, dribbling baby. A little bit of subtlety goes a long way. But of course, the writers are afraid to do anything like that, because they're afraid that you'll just miss it. So here's the really sad thing about this show. It's kind of like the stars aligned. Not only is the premise of following Obi-Wan during his time in isolation genuinely interesting, but the fact they actually managed to get both Ewan and Hayden back makes this show an aspiring screenwriter's wet dream. We get to spend time with our protagonist in this episode. Unlike others where he's often overshadowed, it's somber. It teases at an interesting show, at the potential of what's to come. We get to see the complications of Obi-Wan's day-to-day life. His soul-crushing dead-end job, the isolation from others, and the traders that rip off his own stuff and try to sell it back to him. I mean, they don't even do the courtesy of cleaning it. And you know what? He can't do anything about these problems. Not without drawing unwanted attention to himself. Remember, he's in hiding. It's hard enough for the regular person to survive on Tatooine, but it's much worse for a Jedi who's trying to lay low. Of course, all of this gets compounded when you consider his baggage from the prequels. Order 66, his failure with Anakin. This is a dark time for Kenobi. And time is one of those things Obi-Wan has plenty of. Time to wait. Time to think about all that's happened. About the rise of the Empire and the religious genocide of the Jedi. This series gives us a chance to really explore Obi-Wan's character. A chance which is mercilessly squandered for the sake of the plot. What? You thought this was going to be a slow, introspective look at Obi-Wan Kenobi's psyche? That's boring. Where would all the action scenes be? I want to see cool lightsaber fights. We only have 6 episodes, for some reason. And we need at least 3 fights with Darth Vader. We don't have time for thinking. Thinking is boring. Look, it's Leia. But not really. She swapped herself with another child when no one was looking. Somehow. What a rascal. And look, she's in a tree. Playing with the brand new Disney Star Wars toy. The LOLA 59. Available now. What a lovable scamp. Here she is having a droid confiscated as punishment. Oh, but that doesn't stop our cheeky little rapscallion from stealing it back with no repercussions. And here she is, age of 10, psychoanalyzing her older cousin. What a cute... Okay. Look, I can't keep pretending anymore. Leia is really annoying. It's not the actress's fault. She didn't write her character. The writers did. And the writers must hate Leia because they made her into a really irritating little brat. But we'll get back to that. First, we need to talk about the Three Stooges. That said, this scene really speaks for itself. 3 grown adults have a small child completely surrounded. And they still can't catch her. Was it intentionally stupid? It's at times like these you wonder how the scene was written in the script. Was it just they chase Leia for a bit? Or did the writers actually plot this out in detail? I mean, look at how the actors have to run to not catch Leia. And it's not like the chase scene was even needed. They managed to kidnap Leia anyway. There's only one reason I can think of as to why this is here. It's that the writers wanted to inject some action. Why, though? Were they afraid the audience was falling asleep? Were they trying to create some tension? Some suspense? Because they failed. It wasn't tense. It wasn't even funny. It was pathetic. Okay, so, picture this. You're Senator Bail Organa. You're very rich and politically powerful. Your daughter's been kidnapped. What do? Do you A, send the army you're in control of, B, ask the rebel alliance that you're connected to, C, ask the empire you work with, D, send a group of mercenaries that you can hire, E, send Ahsoka, who you're currently in contact with, or F, send the old Jedi in hiding on Tatooine? That's right. You do anything but F. Because F would be stupid. Really stupid. I mean, Obi-Wan's in hiding for a reason. Along with Yoda, he's at the top of Vader's hit list. Not to mention, he already has a mission. To protect Luke. He can't do that if he's off hunting for Leia. So you'd have to be an absolute moron to pick F. Guess which option Bale chooses. Really? Even worse. Since Bale didn't go public with his daughter's kidnapping, the only way Kenobi could know about it is if he was specifically informed by Bale. Meaning, if Obi-Wan is spotted trying to save Leia, that will incriminate Bale. But then an overwhelming desire to incriminate himself is consistent with Bale's character. Like when he travels to Tatooine to meet Obi-Wan in person. You're a senator. People keep track of your whereabouts. If you go to Tatooine to meet a random desert hobo, people are going to notice. And when they find out that that random desert hobo is Obi-Wan Kenobi and that you're in league with Jedi, you're in big trouble. But Bail Organa isn't the only one who's really good at making bad decisions. Obi-Wan's pretty stellar at it too. After all, he does agree to this mission, which, as it happens, is exactly what Raver wants. See, Raver has concocted this 300 IQ plan. Coax Obi-Wan out of hiding, she'll kidnap Leia, and obviously he'll come to her rescue. Truly a big-brained move. Except, in any reasonable universe, this couldn't work. Because, Bail wouldn't contact Kenobi. He'd choose any of the other options I mentioned instead. Plus, this requires that Raver knows Leia and Obi-Wan are connected in some way, and is sure enough of this connection that she'll risk kidnapping a senator's daughter. This plan isn't just a bad idea, it requires that Raver knows something she can't. But wait, there's an explanation. Somehow, Raver read in the archives about a connection between Bail and Obi-Wan. What? Why is this information in the archives anyway? Who's archiving Obi-Wan and Bail's relationship post-Order 66? Even if we assume this information is somehow in the archives, there's still a huge problem. Because if Raver knows this, then why doesn't anyone else? I mean, surely the Empire would have scoured the archives for this kind of stuff, right? And if other people do know, why isn't Bail Organa in prison? See, if the Empire knows Bail is in league with the Jedi, he's toast. Not only that, but the Empire would interrogate him to find out everything he knows. Everything about the Rebel Alliance, everything about Ahsoka, and everything about Kenobi. Like, where Kenobi is, and what he's doing. Of course, that would lead them to Luke, and if that happened, then the OT can't happen. So, the Empire can't know this, and Raver can't either. Episode 2 opens with Kenobi arriving on Daiyu, which is basically Crime Planet. He's here because he's following the signature of the Three Stooges ship. And this is where it ends. So, Obi-Wan begins his search for Leia. How does he do this? By employing his trusty investigative skills, just like in the prequel trilogy, and he just asks everyone he sees. Obi, baby, you know this is a whole planet, right? She could be anywhere. Hell, the only reason you think she's on this planet is because this is where the ship's signature ended. What if they got here, and hear me out, what if they got here and switched ships, and then just went somewhere else? You gotta have a better plan than this, right? There's just no way this could work. And it works. Seriously. The second person he asks leads him in the right direction to move the plot along. How lucky! That signature that Obi-Wan followed here, Bell just knows about it. The writers just pull it out of thin air. There's no justification or explanation for how Bail knows the specific signature of the ship that kidnapped his daughter. The show expects you to just accept it. We meet a fake Jedi. He seems like such a nice guy. You can tell by the way he scams a desperate family. Of course, Obi-Wan is so much better. He just watches the scam happen. It's not like he scammed them, right? Friendly reminder, inaction is still an action. And a person's actions say a lot about their character. Sure, he calls the fake Jedi out. Eventually. But that's well after watching him scam a family out of their money. Nice job, Obi-Wan. You're a real hero. So, Obi-Wan expects scam Jedi to know where the kidnappers are. Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch. Yet somehow, he does. The conversation basically goes like this. Hello there. You're a criminal. You know where crime happens. Where is crime?
You're right. You got me. Crime happens here.
And it turns out, he was right. Crime did happen there. Scam Jedi legit just points him in the direction of the Three Stooges. And Obi-Wan walks right into their trap. You see, the Three Stooges were expecting Obi-Wan, which kind of makes it look like the scam Jedi set him up. Of course, the show doesn't think that's what happened. The show thinks that the fake Jedi is honest, and that he pointed Obi-Wan in the right direction. And it just happened that the kidnappers were waiting for him to show up, because that was part of their plan. However, if you think about it for a moment, this just doesn't track, because there's no way the Three Stooges could expect Kenobi. For that, they'd have to assume that Kenobi was able to follow them somehow, which, as I've mentioned, is ridiculous. This requires Kenobi to have followed their ship's signature and somehow have located them on a whole planet. I mean, sure, that's what the writers contrive into happening, but without the hand of God pushing all the pieces into the right places, this is impossible. Which is what makes it look like they had immediate prior warning about Kenobi. Otherwise, how could they be expecting him? And the only one who could give them that is Scam Jedi. So he's looking pretty sus right now. And Obi-Wan looks like an idiot for trusting a scam artist. By the way, remember that time Sleaze Bagano offered Obi-Wan some death sticks? And then Obi-Wan Jedi mind tricked him into going home and rethinking his life? Well, I guess Kenobi was the one who really rethought his life, because now his stance on recreational drugs has softened significantly. Here, he accepts free drugs, no questions asked. And it's a good thing too, because he needs those drugs to escape the Stooges' trap. Conveniently, the drugs also have memory-wiping effects, so the Stooges forget everything too. How lucky. And when exactly does Obi-Wan obtain these free drugs? In this same episode, 10 minutes ago? Of course, because the writer was too lazy to even attempt to hide this convenience by spacing it out. Obi-Wan finds Leia in the next room over, because, of course, kidnappers would bring the kid they napped when they're setting a trap to catch her would-be rescuer. Not like they couldn't, I don't know, keep her in a second location or anything. The now rescued Leia, naturally curious, begins asking questions. Awkward questions. And instead of Obi-Wan telling her to keep quiet, he just lets her keep talking. Openly and loudly, about him being a Jedi, and her being the daughter of a senator. All sorts of information you should probably be trying to keep secret, because you're on the run, on Crime Planet. But Obi-Wan doesn't stop her. He doesn't tell her to be quiet. He just lets it happen. It's like they have no idea where they are or how much danger they're in. There's a bounty with Obi-Wan's head on. He's aware of this, and he still isn't being remotely cautious. Then, when Leia sees the Star Wars equivalent of a wanted poster, Obi-Wan doesn't even attempt to defend himself. He just lets her jump to conclusions. Not even educated conclusions. Just crazy conclusions. You're the reason I'm here. They took me to get to you. Did my father even send you? How do I know you're not the real kidnapper? Kenobi has all the information required to shut this conversation down. He shouldn't even be entertaining these questions. Except, he's not allowed to defend himself against these allegations. He just has to stand there and accept them. It makes it look like he doesn't have the answers. But he does. Now, all of this is bad, but it's clearly for a reason. It's because the show needs to fit in a mandated action scene pretty much every episode. The whole reason they contrived this situation is to justify Leia running away. And when Leia runs away, Obi-Wan can't catch her, because then the action scene would be over too quickly. So he develops what I've termed kidnapper syndrome, where despite being a fully grown adult, he can't catch a 10-year-old child. This, you see, leads to Obi-Wan chasing a 10-year-old across rooftops, whilst being shot at by bounty hunters. And yes, it is just as ridiculous as it sounds. Of course, the presence of the bounty hunters also implies that the action mandate could have been met without Leia's questions. He could have just gotten found by them. However, what actually happens helps the writer finagle Obi-Wan into a position where he must use the Force to save Leia. And suddenly, everything becomes pretty transparent. So transparent, in fact, that as soon as he does it, the bounty hunters, the threat of the sequence, legitimately just disappear. They aren't killed, they don't lose him, they just vanish. Because the writers just got what they want, and they no longer need them. Leia saved, the pair are directed by Scam Jedi to off-world transport. See? Scam Jedi was a good guy after all! But unfortunately, Reva, who's been tailing Obi-Wan since he saved Leia, mentally molests Scam Jedi to find out exactly where Kenobi is. Because that's a thing she can do. You better remember that, because I know I will. When she catches up to Kenobi and Leia, she starts monologuing about how evil she is, and about how weak Kenobi is, yada yada yada. You get the gist. That's until she reveals, to Kenobi's surprise, that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader! Wait, shouldn't Kenobi already know this? You know, back in Revenge of the Sith, he sees a hologram of Anakin being referred to as Vader, so this really shouldn't be new information to him. Unless the information is that Darth Vader's still alive, which Kenobi should also know. I mean, everyone in the galaxy knows. Vader's like the poster boy of the Empire. If Obi-Wan knows about the Inquisitors, which he does, then he should also know about Darth Vader, so this reveal is nothing. Unless the reveal is that Reva knows Anakin is Darth Vader, which she can't know, because Disney canon has Vader killing everybody who knows his true identity. So again, she can't know this. This can't happen. And even if it did, Obi-Wan wouldn't have this reaction. Now, after this amazing reveal, Reva begins to close in on Obi-Wan. But before she can find him, he's interrupted by the Grand Inquisitor, who finally begins to reprimand her for all the rules she's broken. I mean, not only does she never follow orders, but she kidnapped a senator's daughter. Earlier this episode, he even confronted her about it. But he just lets her off with a warning. Finally, she's going to get a comeuppance for disobeying orders in the order-focused Empire. And she stabs him. Shit, that's your boss. There's no way you can get away with that. I mean, he's dead, right? She just impaled him. Remember, that's how Maul killed Qui-Gon. Ooh, boy. She is gonna get punished for this. And you can't just kill your boss with no repercussions. Surely. Spoiler alert, she doesn't. While all this buffoonery is happening, it gives Obi-Wan and Leia the chance they need to end the episode by escaping to another planet. Episode 3 opens with their arrival at Mapuzo, and I don't know about you, but I'm sensing a theme here. After the litany of Star Wars shows spending most of their time on Tatooine, the only show, which really should be restricted there, seems absolutely desperate to get away. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't appreciate the change of scenery, it's just, this might be the worst show to do it in. I mean, there was no reason for The Mandalorian or Boba Fett to be restricted to Tatooine. But the Obi-Wan show is sandwiched between the prequels and the original trilogy. That means that it's kind of restricted in what it can and can't do. Having Kenobi planet hopping during this particular period of time is something that's going to require a lot of thought behind it. Thought that the writers have quite evidently not put in. Obi-Wan tells us that Mapuzo used to be prosperous, but then everything changed when the Empire attacked, and subsequently ravaged it. Which, now that I think about it, sounds kind of odd. Why would they ravage a planet that they want to control? Wouldn't it be better to keep it prosperous? You know, so that they could use it for themselves? Now, a scorched earth strategy, like in World War I when the Russians destroyed their own land as they retreated to slow down the German invasion, that could explain a ravaged planet. But, presumably, that would be done by the rebels as they were driven off-world, not by the Empire when they arrive. Of course, that would add nuance to the rebellion. And that's way too complicated for Disney Star Wars. But at least that sets up that the locals are anti-Empire. I mean, there's no way they'd be in favor of a regime that ruined their planet, right? Obi-Wan and Leia arrive at the meeting point they were given by Scam Jedi. Now, remember, they trusted that guy enough to use the transport he told them about. And despite Reva following them, that same transport helped them escape off-world. While you had every right to be suspicious of him earlier, the fact that you escaped the Inquisitors because of his help proves that he's trustworthy. I mean, if he was just trying to hand you over to the Empire, why would he help you escape them? So Kenobi really has every reason to believe that someone will meet him here. But, because they weren't there the instant they arrive, he decides he can't be bothered waiting, and he just leaves. Seriously, you're supposed to wait here and you just couldn't be bothered? You cannot trust the guy, sure, but his information was legitimate so far. At least wait to see if anyone shows up. You don't even have to wait at the exact spot. You can hide and wait nearby. All you need is to be able to see the meeting location. Kenobi's choice to just leave really reflects poorly on his character. And I'm pretty sure the only reason this happens is because it had to. But I'll get into that later. Rather than Obi-Wan's genius plan of just walking to the nearest town from the middle of nowhere, Leia decides they should hitchhike. That's right, Leia, the 10-year-old, makes the reasonable, mature decision. Man, Obi-Wan. You okay, buddy? What's going on? Why is a 10-year-old coming up with a better plan than you? This is embarrassing. Leia, of her own volition, flags down nearby transport, approaches Freck, the friendly driver, and manages to talk him into giving them a lift. All while, Kenobi just stands there. Seriously, who's the adult in this relationship? This is so pathetic. Then, as they get on the transport, Kenobi notices an Imperial flag on the back. Now this should be ringing some pretty loud alarm bells. Uh-oh, an Empire sympathizer. We probably can't trust this guy, and we shouldn't get in his transport. But no, Obi-Wan, oblivious to risk, gets on anyway. Guess what happens next? Freck picks up some stormtroopers. They're just, hanging out in the middle of nowhere. So now, Obi-Wan and Leia are trapped on this transport, sandwiched between stormtroopers. Good thing none of them recognize General Kenobi, one of the most wanted Jedi in the galaxy, or Leia Organa, the recently kidnapped Princess of Alderaan. Instead, the writers take this opportunity to further ruin Kenobi and have him address Leia by her real name, out loud, in front of all the stormtroopers, pretty much revealing that they aren't who they said they were, and that they're attempting to hide their real identities.
They know what they're doing, Leia.
This should be triggering some major red flags for the stormtroopers. But luckily, as per Disney canon, stormtroopers are all mentally deficient. So when Obi-Wan makes up an obviously fake story on the fly, they 100% buy it. Not only does this ruin the competency of the Empire, but this whole experience completely destroys any intelligence Kenobi as a character possesses. And the saddest part? It's also unnecessary. Right after Freck drops the troopers off in the middle of nowhere, he drives them to an Imperial checkpoint where they're immediately recognized. This whole event could have been completely cut out and nothing would have changed. It'd be bad enough if it only happened to force a plot point, but since all it does is take away intelligence points from Kenobi, it's genuinely insulting. It's time for our first mandated fight scene of the episode. Gotta wake the audience up, right? In this fight, Kenobi, a man who has barely used blasters up to this point and considers them uncivilized, is now an ace shot who can take out probe droids and stormtroopers with perfect accuracy. Then, he does something I genuinely never expected Kenobi to do. He grabs the civilian Freck, who, need I remind you, helped him and Leia out, and Kenobi uses him as a living shield. Our protagonist, everyone. Then, after Kenobi decides that Freck served his purpose, he knocks him out. Poor guy. That's what you get for being nice to a Jedi, I guess. You know, I'm starting to see how, from Anakin's point of view, the Jedi were evil. I didn't see it at the time, but man, Jesus. The final surviving stormtrooper, after witnessing all of his friends get brutally slaughtered, takes Leia hostage and tries to use her to get Kenobi to drop his weapon. Kenobi, of course, can't be reasoned with, so he just shoots the dude. Wow, so many ways that could have gone wrong. What if you missed and hit Leia? What if the stormtrooper shot Leia? Obi-Wan, having successfully navigated his way through the mandatory fight scene, shoots the laser gate off, despite the fact he could have just walked around it, and then proceeds to walk with Leia in the vague direction of the nearest town. Putting that hollow noggin to work again, I see. Except, they don't get far. Not before they get arrested by 3 additional stormtroopers who arrive. Now, Obi-Wan just killed 6 of these guys. From the same position, too. But I guess 3 is too much to handle? Luckily, he's saved by Tala Durinth. Drith? How am I supposed to say this? He's saved by Tala. Yeah, that's how I'm going to say it going forward. Who, interestingly enough, is also the person he was supposed to meet earlier. You know, the one he didn't wait for. Now, if he had waited at the meeting point earlier, basically he would have avoided all of this. But now, because he couldn't wait 5 minutes, the Empire's been alerted to his location. They wouldn't have even known he was on this planet if he'd have just waited. Great! Good job, Kenobi. It's not just this episode either. The rest of the series wouldn't happen if Obi-Wan had just waited for the contact. The contact that he had no reason not to wait for. I get that I'm really harping on what seems like a very small point, but to be honest, it's really not. Thing is, Kenobi as a show can only continue to exist from this point onwards because of this one out-of-character choice that Obi-Wan makes. And again, it's not even like it's a justified choice. It makes no sense, and it only happened so that everything else can happen. That's fundamentally bad writing. Tala takes them to what I've dubbed the counter-captivity corridor, because it's very alliterative, and also it's better than my previous idea, the smuggle tunnel. But basically, this is how she smuggles people off-world. We're also introduced to the loader bot, who assists her. Now, one big problem with the counter-captivity corridor is that Tala lets all the people who pass through write their names on the wall. This essentially leaves a record of everyone who she's smuggled to freedom. Man, I sure hope the Empire never finds this, or everyone whose name's written here would be completely compromised. Wink, wink. Finally, Vader arrived, and the consumers just creamed themselves. Finally, we're gonna see Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fight. Again. For the 3rd time. And as soon as Vader's on screen, he sends a chill down our collective spines as he starts randomly killing civilians for no reason other than he's just a bad guy. And bad guys kill people, right? What? I'd understand it if he was killing rebels. Hell, even just torturing civilians with the Force in an attempt to lure Kenobi out. But how does the Empire have any support if Vader just goes around killing random people like this? Back in the original trilogy, sure, Vader used to kill people, but only officers. Officers that had failed him in some way. The idea was to set a standard for the other officers so they would know what would happen if they didn't meet Vader's expectations. But now, a lot of worse writers have decided to take this action and turn it into a trope where the bad guy just kills people because he's bad. To see this phenomenon be transplanted onto Vader, it's just clear Flanderization, and it's kind of upsetting. Vader wouldn't do this. What does he even hope to achieve by doing this? I assume it's an attempt to lure Kenobi out, but I guess it doesn't work because Kenobi just watches it happen and does nothing. Which I guess is a reoccurring theme of this show. Kenobi just watching people suffer and doing nothing about it. Oh, I'm sorry. He does do something. He runs away. Yeah. Kenobi, the protagonist of this show, the hero of this story, he just runs away. I mean, this guy fought in the Clone Wars. He was a general. I'd expect anything but this. This is giga cowardly. Omega yellow belly. He leaves those civilians to get killed by Vader. Nice. Nice job, Kenobi. Unfortunately for him, though, while he spent the last 10 years actually living under a rock, Vader has been developing a brand new Force technique called the Force Teleport. Allow me to demonstrate. Right, so as you can see, this is a frame from Kenobi. Obviously, it's incredibly dark, but luckily we can fix that by changing the exposure. Look, we can see what's actually happening now. Great, perfect start. Now that we can actually see what's happening, I can point out that that's Kenobi, and he running this way. This whole area, that's the town where Darth Vader is. Okay? Everybody got that. So the bird's eye view looks something like this, right? Town here, Kenobi here. He's running this way. Now, as we can see, if Kenobi keeps running this direction, he's going to run into these. The dunes that are kind of blocking his way. And they're pretty solidly around this whole area. Right? We can see that pretty easily. So he's going to have to turn this way, which he does. Because, of course, as we know, this is a video game. There's no possible way he could run over the dunes or through the dunes or around the dunes because, invisible walls. So to update the bird's eye view, he's going this way now. So just to see that in motion, he's turned, going the new direction, he's moving. He's looking around, right? Looks behind him for a few seconds, looks forwards again, and whoa! So just to be clear on that, Kenobi turned, he walked for a fair distance, as we saw, and then suddenly it looks like Vader appears out of nowhere. Now, if we look on the bird's eye view, Kenobi kind of goes this way, and then boom, Vader. So we can only assume that Vader must have come from here. But if that's the case, how the hell did Kenobi not see him? Think about this, right? Kenobi's field of view is going to be like this, right? He's going to see all of this, and he's looking around as well. He is constantly, like, he looks behind him, he looks to the left, he looks all around. So how does he not see any of this? There's this whole period from here to here where Kenobi should have rightly seen him move. And even if he didn't see him move there, as Kenobi's going this direction, he's going to see Vader just standing there, isn't he? So anyway, we see Kenobi here, he sees Vader, and he's super surprised. He's like, what? How did you get there? It's not like you could have walked and I should have seen you. He reaches for his lightsaber, and then, in an act of complete bravery, he decides to run away like a coward. So let's update the bird's eye view again, right? Kenobi, right? Vader's just standing there. Kenobi was here, but he's now run this way, in between the dunes that he should have been running through to begin with. So Kenobi runs between the dunes here, and he makes a turn, go this way. And as we can see, he completely breaks the 180 rule. Now, the 180 rule for the uninitiated is the idea that you have a perspective in which a scene is shown, and that you do not go to the other side of this perspective. So the camera is here, but the camera should not then flip the other side of here, because that makes this situation very confusing. It makes the direction that the character is going confusing. So now we can see why I elected to go with a bird's eye view. It's so that we can see how the camera work makes this even more confusing than it already was. So this is the approximately the other side of the dunes from what we can see. Kenobi's gone through. He's turned this way. Just kind of annoying that they couldn't have shown that clearly. So he runs between these dunes, ignites his lightsaber, and has a bit of a moment. So on the bird's eye view, that looks a little like he goes into here. There's a little dune alcove sorts where he currently resides. And then from the shadows emerges Vader. But wait, how? What? Now let's check this out in the bird's eye view, right? We have Kenobi, who's in here, and he's spinning around, he's looking all these different places, and he's swinging his lightsaber around, but he's still going the same direction the whole time. And then here, Vader just appears out of nowhere, coming this direction. Now I have one question. How did Vader get all the way from over here to all the way over here? How did he do that? So we see Vader, Kenobi sees Vader, and he decides, nah, I'm out. And he just leaves. So it looks a little like he's gone this way. That direction. Now, there's a cut here, and it goes to a completely different scene with Raver, but I'm just going to slot these two scenes together. Kenobi's going in this direction. The cut roughly happens here, and the next time we come up with Kenobi, he's still going like this kind of a direction, right? That's what I'm going to assume. So we catch up with Kenobi. He's gone a direction. He's turned a corner. Now he's walking down this area at a gentle pace. We'll express that on the bird's eye view like this, right? Kenobi, he's now going this way. But then suddenly, from the shadows, here's Vader! Wah! And I have one question. How did Kenobi not see him? Seriously. So, the cone of vision, right? He goes around this corner, and he should be seeing all the way around here, and even that way. He should have this whole area in his line of sight. And Vader's here! So he should absolutely have seen him. There's no way he could miss him. It's like he's walking directly to him. And also, the last time we saw Vader, he was behind Kenobi, right? To the left of him. Now he's to the right of him. in front of him, and it's like, okay, I understand a cut happened, but like, you're expecting me to buy a lot for Vader to be in that position. So again, it comes across a little bit like another Vader teleport. God, look at this mess. You could convince me they were intentionally playing this as a joke if it was any other scenario. Now, the first thing I want to talk about concerning the actual fight is the location. Throughout Star Wars, we've had many interesting fight locations. Bespin, the Death Star, Geonosis, the Senate, Mustafar, even the sequels had that fight on the Death Star wreckage. But here in Kenobi, all we get is this boring quarry. It reminds me of Power Rangers, but at least Power Rangers had the excuse of being incredibly low budget. And can we talk about the lighting? It's so dark that you can barely see anything aside from the lightsabers themselves. And that's only because they're emitting light. This is even worse when you consider that Vader is wearing all black. It's really hard to make out his movements accurately. Something that Disney Star Wars has been doing for a while. I understand that it's cool that the only lighting is the light from their lightsabers, and that the darkness helps cover up the flaws in the choreography and the CGI, but the more you do it, the less charm it has, and it becomes transparently obvious why you're doing it too. Finally, let's talk about that choreography. Compare it to the fight on Mustafar. These are high-level lightsaber duelists. This fight should be a spectacle, filled with complex maneuvers. Instead, it looks a lot more like two kids swinging sticks at each other while playing Star Wars. Even if you compare it to fan works like Scene 38 Reimagined, you can clearly see how the Kenobi show falls short. Look at this scene. Vader smacks Kenobi's lightsaber so hard that it clearly swings into his arm. This is completely unintentional, but somehow a mistake that made it into the final cut of the fight. Feels like they didn't even care. Then, the fight ends when Vader grabs Obi-Wan using the Force, essentially breaking an unspoken rule. Let me explain. If Force users can do this to other Force users, then there would never be any need to have lightsabers. Fights would just be decided by who can grip the other with the Force first. It destroys any attempt at balancing Force users that you could even make. Why didn't Vader use this on Luke in Empire? Just Force grip Luke while you dip him in carbonite. Same with any fight, really. Any fight that involves Force users would be instantly over if one of them could Force grip the other. So, by Vader being able to Force grip Kenobi, the Kenobi show essentially establishes a precedent that contradicts every other Force user fight in Star Wars. Good job! You can clearly tell that the writers really thought about this scene. And by really, I mean not at all. Vader then drops some flammable rocks, on the ground and ignites them using his lightsaber, effectively creating an impromptu fire pit. Then, Vader dunks Obi-Wan in the fire. Face first. What? So, Kenobi's horrifically burned then, right? I mean, the last time we saw someone catch fire in Star Wars, it wasn't exactly pretty. Unless if Kenobi's robes are enchanted with fire immunity, he should be sizzling like a sausage right now. But don't worry, it's okay. Don't you remember? Obi-Wan isn't a burn victim in A New Hope. So despite Vader toasting him like a marshmallow, Obi-Wan doesn't get any physical injuries, because that would break canon. When Vader's finished making his Kenobi flambe, he uses a force push to simultaneously send Kenobi flying and to blow out the flames between him and Kenobi. Backup stormtroopers arrive, and it looks like the end for Kenobi-Wan. Oh my god. I just called him Kenobi-Wan. It's just thinking about this show is frazzling my brain. But then, Tala, who's supposed to be busy smuggling Leia out right now, by the way, shoots the flammable rocks and reignites the fire. Somehow, effectively blocking Vader and the stormtroopers from getting to Kenobi. Vader, of course, is utterly powerless to stop the flames that he put out mere seconds ago, and instead, he just stands there, watching as Obi-Wan gets saved by the loader bot. Surely, Vader's trying to let Kenobi go, right? I mean, we all know he could have stopped him if he wanted to, right? But if that's the case, then why doesn't he stop the troopers from shooting at Kenobi? Just food for thought. During the Vader-Kenobi debacle, Reva finds the counter-captivity corridor, essentially giving the Empire a list of names, as I mentioned earlier. And then she force teleports past Leia, meaning that she arrives at the spaceport on the other end of the tunnel first. So, first Reva finds the tunnel, and instead of following it, she somehow figures out where it exits. Then, not only does she get there before Leia, but she gets there with enough time to spare so that she can kill the pilot. And the whole reason she does this is to kidnap Leia again. Why? So she can interrogate her for information about the rebels. What? Why would a 10-year-old know anything? And why didn't you interrogate her when you had her captured earlier? But even worse, you know someone who would have all the information she wants? The pilot, you know, the one that was going to smuggle Leia to the rebels? The one that Reva just killed? Well, if Reva hadn't killed him, she might have been able to extract the information she wants with her mind powers. But, I guess she didn't think of that? Or rather, the writers didn't think of that. And that marks the end of episode 3. A confusing ending that leaves me with much more questions than answers. Ah, the Bacta tank. Healer of all wounds, even burns. Except if you're Vader, I guess. Then it does nothing. Episode 4 begins with Kenobi taking a dip in the Bacta tank to heal his burns. Yep, the show thinks it's that easy. Makes you wonder why they didn't do this with Anakin back in the prequel trilogy. The rebels helped Kenobi because they need him to save Leia. After all...
She knows everything.
What? You're telling me that the 10-year-old Leia knows everything? Seriously? Okay, let's think about this. Is it just that Leia knows the planet the rebels are on? Because that's not enough information to find the base. I know that Star Wars has trouble with this, but remember, whole planet. Or are they saying that prior to Leia being kidnapped, she had information about the rebels? If so, that's so much worse. Leia's a child. Who's telling her this critical information? Now, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure the real explanation is probably that the writers themselves aren't sure what there is to know. So they just said everything. Tala jumps in and suggests that her cover as an Imperial officer can help Kenobi rescue Leia. Cool, except you don't have that anymore. The last thing the Empire knew is that she went out with a group of stormtroopers that wound up shot in the back. Either they assume she's also dead, or that she did the, shooting. Regardless, they still think she's on Mapuzo. If she just shows up at the Fortress Inquisitorius out of nowhere, people are going to ask questions. Besides, why would an Imperial officer stationed on Mapuzo have clearance for the fortress anyway? Speaking of the Fortress Inquisitorius, the name's a bit on the nose, isn't it? Fortress Inquisitorius, more like the Fortress Inquifatorius, because of how much it stinks. Yeah, it's pretty cringe, but then so's the fortress. So, Kenobi and Tala come up with a plan. They'll head to the Moon Nur, where Kenobi will swim to the fortress and enter through an underwater door. Meanwhile, Tala will land in the fortress's hangar, waltz through the check-in, and head for a terminal that she can use so she can direct Kenobi to Leia. Great plan. Except, all unscheduled arrivals will be intercepted in orbit. Think of Area 51. They don't just stop you at the front door. They stop you at the perimeter. Where exactly will Tala drop Kenobi off? I mean, if she drops Kenobi too far away, he'll drown before he even gets to the base. And she can't drop him too close, because then they'll be spotted. Also, the fortress has shields. This is established in Fallen Order, in a scene that Kenobi blatantly steals from, by the way. That said, unlike Kenobi, Fallen Order at least had the decency to address the fortress's shields. Also, how will Tala land in the hangar? Assuming they aren't intercepted in orbit, she'll definitely get stopped if she tries to land in the hangar. Also, Tala shouldn't be here. So how's she going to get past the check-in? The moment they run her ID, she'll be compromised. And as I mentioned earlier, she's supposed to be stationed on Mapuzo. And finally, how could she get access to the terminal? What happened to password protection? Oh wait, I forgot. Mando established the Empire doesn't have that. Because all you need is a face to access an officer's terminal. Tala will be fine. Which, hilariously, Vader wouldn't be, because he doesn't have one. Man, the Empire's dumb. There's just so much wrong with this plan. And even just by saying this, I've already thought about it way more than the writers ever did. They deliberately rewrote shields so they wouldn't have to think about them. And they didn't even bother with checkpoints. We're lucky we get a scene where Tala's questioned. But don't worry, they solved that little problem by having Tala pull rank. Rank she doesn't have. She sits at a terminal that I guess no one else was using, and she begins guiding Kenobi through the fortress. Kenobi solid snakes his way through the base.
The Empire doesn't take kindly to Jedi sympathizers.
He will come for me.
Whoa, so they know Leia's a Jedi sympathizer? Oh wow. So they know Bail's a Jedi sympathizer too, right? Why hasn't Bail been arrested? Also, why is Reva interrogating Leia? I mean, eventually she uses her mind powers, but, like, why wouldn't you open with that? But now that she's using the mind powers on Leia, she's gonna extract all the information she needs, right?
You're strong.
Come on. Seriously? Leia, the 10-year-old, is too mentally strong? What? I mean, I get that Force Mind Read can only work on mentally weak people. That falls in line with Jedi mind tricks, but surely children fall under the mentally weak umbrella? She's 10! How mentally strong is she? Also, just like the Stooges in Episode 1, the Empire just lets her keep the droid. Come on, guys. It was bad when the kidnappers do it, but it's downright awful when the Empire does it. Reva, incapable of getting Leia to break, orders a child to be tortured. Remember this. Remember Reva sending a child to be tortured, because I know I will. But then, just before we can witness child torture in a Disney Star Wars show, an improvement at this point, Reva gets called out of the interrogation room by Tala. And you can't torture a child while Reva's not in the room, for some reason. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's probably standard Empire procedure. It's not like Vader ever let troopers continue to torture someone after he left the room. Oh wait. However, this gives Obi-Wan the opportunity to save Leia. He teleports in and kills the troopers, one at a time. Now, you'd think the second trooper would see or hear his friend being attacked by a big glowy sword a meter away from him, but you'd be wrong. Must have been listening to music, with his eyes closed. So, Reva, convinced that Tala is a spy, has her arrested. Now, what happens next is so mind-blowingly dumb that I have to break it down piece by piece. First, Reva leaves Tala with 2 troopers, directly arresting her, and a 3rd officer in the room. Keep in mind, this 3rd officer is just off camera. Then, just before Tala can be cuffed, she knocks out the 2 troopers arresting her. Look at those slaps, right in the helmet. How is that supposed to knock them out? It's honestly the most pathetic attempt at choreography I think I've ever seen. Now, that alone is bad enough. But remember that officer I told you about? The one standing just off camera? The one in perfect position to see this all happen? Well, since she's off camera, she just kinda stops existing, meaning she can't intervene at all. The show forgets about her as soon as she's off screen. She doesn't leave the room with Reva or anything, she just poofs out of existence. Because it's inconvenient for the plot. Now, I've been putting this off for a while, but it's about time to address the Force in this show. Through the Star Wars series, the Force has often been shown to have limits. Though Yoda was able to lift Luke's X-Wing, he did so with great difficulty. And he was a centuries-old Jedi Master. Often, in newer pieces of Star Wars media, the Force has suffered from a significant power creep. In the sequels, we saw Rey and Palpatine display what I would describe as outrageous levels of power. Kenobi, much like other Disney Star Wars media, has also fallen prey to this. We'll get to more examples later, but right now, all I need is this scene to point out how wonky the power scaling is. Earlier this episode, he was struggling with basic training. Now, he's holding back the weight of an ocean with relative ease. Makes crushing rocks seem such a breeze. Now, I'm not denying that there was power creep in the old expanded universe, because there definitely was. But it was at least always relegated to secondary media. Books, comics, games. Now, thanks to the sequels, Star Wars power creep is an inescapable part of the canon, heavily intertwined with the primary media. Now, it would be easy to write off Kenobi as just another victim of power creep if the show didn't extend the power of the Force even more. But again, we'll get to that later. After the water shenanigans, Kenobi is somehow not in the blast radius of the window he was just standing next to. The stormtroopers on the other side of the room, however, I mean, you tell me how that works out. But let's forget that for now, because it's time for the worst part of this episode, and potentially the worst part of this series. The trenchcoat scene. Yeah, this just doesn't work. I mean, it couldn't work normally, but it definitely won't work when the Inquisitorium is on high alert. You're telling me that no one notices a man with Kenobi's face wearing a trench coat with a deformed body shape and 4 legs as he walks through the middle of a hangar, literally surrounded by stormtroopers? Come on. This is real concave brain level writing. The Empire's a joke. So's this show. Reva finally catches up to them and calls them out. But if she hadn't, the trenchcoat technique would have actually allowed them to escape the fortress. And just when they need them, 2 ships come in to rescue Kenobi, Leia, and Tala. Oh, by the way, this was completely unplanned. See, the original plan is that they just walk back into the ship they came in on and fly away. But since Reva catches up to them and exposes them, this escape plan that they had can't work. Which is why this coincidental, coordinated rescue is so lucky. It's not even like it was a planned backup, because Kenobi and Tala seem completely surprised by it as well. God literally teleports in 2 fighters to rescue them just when they need it. And obviously, by God, I mean the writers. It's absolutely insane. Plus, I guess this means the Inquisitorium really does have no shields and no defense systems against this kind of thing just happening. I mean, as soon as these ships entered the Inquisitorium's airspace, they should have been shot down. The episode ends with Kenobi escaping, and yes, the Empire doesn't send any ships after them. But before I move on to the next episode, one more thing. Remember when Reva was interrogating Leia? Well, it turns out she put a tracker on her droid, so now they can follow them to the Rebel base. Now, this is basically the plan that Vader uses in A New Hope, to follow the Falcon to the Rebel base, except then it makes sense. They don't actually try to kill the fleeing rebels. Here, however, it doesn't work at all. Reva clearly didn't expect or want Leia to escape, so why, oh why, would she plan ahead and put a tracker on her droid? Another reason that it doesn't work is because Obi-Wan and Tala are much more likely to drop Leia off on Alderaan before going straight back to the rebel base. And if they drop Leia off, she's gonna take her droid with her. I just hope this isn't supposed to imply that Vader got the idea from Reva, because I don't think I could take that if that was the case. Also, this whole absurd tracker on the droid plot that Reva's come up with is so unnecessary from a writing perspective. All we need to do is think about what the writers were hoping to achieve with this. What they wanted was for the Empire to follow the rebels back to their base. Now, how they decided to do this was to come up with this whole post hoc tracker explanation. But they didn't need to. Instead, if they just had the Empire send ships after the fighters that rescued Kenobi, Tala, and Leia, then they could just follow them to the rebel base that way. It would make much more sense, and also we'd actually get the Empire doing something. Some kind of response for invading the Inquisitorius. But no, all we get is this tismy little tracker, and it's just annoying. Finally, to show that Leia's droid has turned evil, they show the droid's eye turning red, which is super obvious. Isn't that the last thing you'd want a hack droid to be? Because, I mean, if Kenobi, or Tala, or hell, anyone at all just turns over and sees it, they're gonna know something's up. Deactivate it and fix it. As far as I can tell, this is only here for the audience. That's right, Disney really does think that little of you. Episode 5 opens with a flashback to the prequels, otherwise known as more nostalgia bait. We watch a young Anakin and Obi-Wan sparring with lightsabers, which, now that I think about it, is kinda nuts. That's so dangerous. You make one mistake and bam, you could lose an arm or something. I mean, they give real lightsabers to little kids. These Jedi are super irresponsible. I'm starting to root for the Empire. Wait, no. The Empire deliberately killed kids. That's kind of worse than irresponsibly killing kids, I guess. I won't lie, though. It is nice to see Hayden and Ewan as their prequel characters again. Probably could have used some de-aging on Anakin, though. Especially as this is supposed to be Attack of the Clones Anakin. Speaking of which, it's kind of weird that this flashback is set during Attack of the Clones and not closer to Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is way more popular, and a closer age match for Hayden. Now, what I don't like about this flashback is where it goes. Anakin clearly beats Kenobi, but then Kenobi decides he didn't lose, he cheats, and then decides he won. This flashback is supposed to tell us that Kenobi is wiser than Anakin, but it just looks like Kenobi's a sore loser. When we get back to present day, we see that Kenobi and Leia are at the rebel base. Why? As I mentioned before, you didn't need to come back here. You could have gone straight home, but then Reva's tracker would have been useless. So again, the show happens this way because otherwise it would have been over too soon. This is really bad writing, guys. A big part of your job as a writer is to write the logical reasons for why the story happens the way it does. You need to write the in-universe reason for why everything happens. Oh, by the way, remember that fake Jedi from episode 2? Well, he's alive, and he's here too, at the rebel base, also looking to be smuggled off-world.
What are you doing here?
I had nowhere else to go. Right after I saw you, I got into a fight with that scary lady Inquisitor. Now I'm wanted by the Empire.
So, she just let him live. But then later put a bounty on him, even though she could have killed him right there. Let's be honest. The real reason is because they thought his character was too funny to kill off. Think they'll ever tell us the in-universe reason? I'm not going to get my hopes up. Now, since the Empire's following the tracker on Leia's droid, they immediately show up at the rebel base too, in a Star Destroyer. Assumedly, the base has some kind of shield. Otherwise, they could just bombard it from orbit, right? Instead, they decide to siege it. How they do this is by gathering in a disorderly fashion outside the front door. And while the stormtroopers are gathering outside the base, the rebels now have the time to barricade the door and set up defenses. Now, if the troopers had just started attacking as soon as they landed, they'd already be inside the base. But because they're not allowed to do anything until Rava shows up, they give the rebels all the time they need to prepare. When Rava finally does arrive, they begin shooting round after round of this big siege cannon. But it seems to have little or no effect on the door.
Broken, we need the hangar roof open.
The reason they want the hangar door open is so they can escape. But remember, there's a Star Destroyer stationed over the base. If you open the hangar's roof, you open up the whole hangar to airstrikes. Which is doubly bad because the hangar is where everybody's staying. Rava and Kenobi get the chance to talk through this thick blast door. To be honest, I'm surprised they can even hear each other. But I genuinely don't care at this point because this conversation is golden. It's filled to the brim with so much bad.
Of Order 66, you were a youngling.
Wow, that's a conclusion to jump to, I guess. I mean, he's right, but what information led him to that conclusion? Is it because she knows who Vader really is? There's tons of ways she could know that, and Obi-Wan just happened to guess the right one. Next, they try to play on our emotions by telling us about Rava's tragic backstory, but it just can't work. Rava hunts down and kills Jedi. She does the same thing Vader did during Order 66 all the time. It's her job as an Inquisitor. She gets no sympathy. She's just as bad, just not as powerful. And that's when Rava reveals her real goal. You thought she was just a big bad meanie that did horrible things all the time. But no, actually she was doing it to hunt Vader all along. Wait, what? But that doesn't coincide with her actions at all. That's really been her plan the whole time. Why didn't she kill Vader at any of the opportunities she's had? And why is she so aggressive in her pursuit of Jedi? The first episode, she threatened to kill multiple people for one rando Jedi. Last episode, she was going to torture a kid for information on the rebels. How does this help her achieve her goals?
Where were you? While he was killing my friends.
He was on Utapau, ending the Clone Wars. Also, back then, forced teleportation didn't exist, so it's not like he could just warp to the Jedi Temple. Of course, Obi-Wan can't say any of this. He can't defend himself, because that fights against the narrative that the writers are trying to establish. Just like a lot of the dialogue in this show, it's unfortunately transparent. By the way, she just had this whole conversation, about Order 66 and her plans to kill Vader, right in front of an army of stormtroopers. And even though she's talking loud enough for Kenobi to hear through a thick blast-proof door, none of them can hear her, because they were off camera, and the writers forgot about them. Which, as we've established, the writers have a tendency to do. Then, Rava just lightsabers the blast door open. Yep, that's right. She could have done that the whole time. So, the siege cannon was worthless then, right? How is a cannon less powerful than a handheld device? I guess the Empire was just wasting time again. Now, as soon as the doors open up, everybody starts shooting. But nobody gets shot. They're all grouped up, too. Nobody uses a grenade either. And the whole time, the camera's shaking like it's having an epileptic episode. Tala and the loader bot die in this heroic sacrifice, using a grenade that they could have used the whole time. You may have noticed, but I haven't really had anything to say about the loader bot. That's because exactly like Leia's droid, it's kind of a non-character. It exists purely for the sake of being toyetic. Something for your kids to buy. Remember when droids used to have characters? People didn't like R2-D2 and C-3PO because their designs made for good merchandise. They liked them because despite their limited range of movement and often limited range of communication, they still had notable character. This is something you just can't attribute to the loader bot. He exists to be a toy and to serve as a plot device. That's it. Now, Tala, on the other hand, had lots of character potential. Lots of squandered character potential. An officer working as a double agent after seeing the horrors of the Empire firsthand. Now that sounds like an interesting character. You could focus on her desire for redemption, the regret she feels over her actions in the name of the Empire, her state of mind constantly risking her life from the inside. But we get none of that. Instead, we get a forgettable, idiotic, rank-pulling bint with the personality of a used sock. Obi-Wan Kenobi surrenders himself, explicitly so that he can bring Vader to Reva, in front of all the stormtroopers. You know, the same ones from earlier. Of course, there's no repercussions for that either. Guess these troopers are really good at keeping secrets. Or the only thing their armor is good at protecting them from is sound. Instead of holding Kenobi prisoner, Reva sends Kenobi off to be secured inside by only 2 stormtroopers. I think we can all see where this is going. And just like Tala last episode, Kenobi effortlessly beats them and escapes. So if you can remember way back when I mentioned they were trying to get the hangar roof open, the reason they couldn't is because of Leia's droid. The hacked one, with the big red light that no one notices. Well, you see, Leia's droid opens up a maintenance hatch, somehow, and begins sabotaging the rebel base. The rebels assume there must be an issue with the wiring in the vents, so to deal with this problem, they send the 10-year-old in. That's right, the 10-year-old Leia is sent into the vents with the intention of somehow fixing the wiring that will open up the hangar doors. Okay, so first things first, why are there critical wiring systems in vents that are too small for regular adults? I mean, who designs their base in a way where only a small child can fix a potential problem? Or are we suggesting that these repairs are normally done by droids? In which case, why aren't we sending a droid to do the job? Now, I think we know the real reason that they sent Leia in. It's so they can have her fight and fix her droid. Seriously, to fix her droid, all she does is open it up and take out the evil chip. And bam! Just like that, the droid is good again. Yeah, it really was that easy. Then she bypasses the compressor and the hangar doors open. Now come on, it was pretty ridiculous when Rey did it. I think it's even worse when a 10-year-old Leia does it. So, what should happen next is an instant orbital bombardment on the fleeing rebels through the now open hangar doors. After all, remember, there's a huge Star Destroyer flying right over the base, just waiting for an opportunity. Soon as those doors open, it should be raining hellfire down on them. But it doesn't, because again, not only did the rebels forget about the Star Destroyer, but the writers did too. Unsatisfied with how much they've already ruined Bail, they give him another go by having him send a message to Kenobi. And man, he must be an absolute idiot to send this message.
I know we said no communication, but your silence worries me. If he's found you, if he's learned of the children, if I don't hear from you soon, I'll head to Tatooine. Owen will need help with the boy. I pray you're safe, Obi-Wan. Both of you.
Now, why would you send a message that gives out such important information to somebody that you're worried has been captured? Because, I mean, if you think they've been captured, you must also be under the impression that this message you've sent them will probably be seen by the captors, right? I mean, not only does this message connect you to Kenobi, but it reveals the information you're both trying to keep secret.
I'll head to Tatooine. Owen will need help with the boy.
Is the worst thing you could say. If the Empire sees this, they'll know about Luke. Obi-Wan not deleting this message immediately is also a big blunder. Because here's the thing. Before Kenobi surrendered himself, he gave Scam Jedi all of his stuff, including this message. And of course, while Scam Jedi is escaping, he drops Bale's message. It's the only thing he drops, and it's the most important thing. And worst of all, he even sees that he dropped it, and he still decides to leave it behind. Then, Vader arrives. He opens the rebels' barricaded doors. I guess they're just unlocked now. And he uses the Force to stop a ship mid-takeoff. Yikes. That's another unspoken rule broken. Hey, how many is that now? 2? Vader can't possibly do this. Otherwise, why didn't he do this to the Falcon on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back? Not to mention, this power is OP as hell. After he pulls down the ship, it's revealed that it was actually just a decoy to distract Vader so the real ship could escape. There's a few problems with this. This means that A, they knew Vader was strong enough to pull down a ship mid-flight, and B, that Vader wouldn't just do the same thing to the real ship when it takes off. From the perspective of the rebels, this plan is... why would they ever think of it? It's pretty clear that the only reason it's here is so that they can have a dramatic reveal that actually Vader was pulling down the wrong ship. But if your idea for a dramatic reveal could potentially break the Force, like a core element of your universe, you should probably just give up on the idea. After the rebels escape, Reva sneaks up on Vader to attack him. Now, she could have done this while he was busy pulling on that ship, but instead she decided to wait until after he was finished. How unusually polite of her. But by doing this, she has Vader's full attention. And with Vader's full attention, she doesn't stand a chance. She does a few Dark Souls dodge rolls, but it's not enough. She gets effortlessly overpowered by Vader. Vader stabs Reva, and it's revealed in that moment that he also stabbed Reva as a child. Wait, so Reva was stabbed during Order 66? By Vader, no less, and lived? How? Plus, since Reva's been stabbed in the stomach twice, pretty sure Qui-Gon's rolling in his grave at this point. Oh, wait, he was burned. So, maybe his ashes are churning in his urn? Speaking of surviving lethal blows, the Grand Inquisitor's back, which means he survived getting stabbed in the gut too. By the way, how did he get here? Just out of curiosity. Was he hiding on the ship the whole time? That must have been awkward. Also, that means Vader knew Reva attempted to kill the Grand Inquisitor and purposely didn't punish her. Why? Because she was useful? So, are we saying that Vader predicted all of this? Except for Reva's betrayal, right? Or did he plan for that too? And who else knew? Did the stormtroopers know? How could no one know that the Grand Inquisitor was on the ship? Or did they know? Did all the troopers know the plan? Is that why they didn't react when Reva spoke out loud about killing Vader? Were they all in on it and just laughing about it behind Reva's back? I've got so many questions. After taunting her, Vader and the Grand Inquisitor just leave Reva to die. Thing is, Vader stabbed her in the gut, which is what Reva did to the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor who just said he survived it thanks to his desire for revenge. Do they not think that Reva would have a desire for revenge after being stabbed in the gut like this? One of you guys literally survived this. How are you not finishing her off? You know, just to make sure, tie up loose ends, stop her from, I don't know, coming after you or causing trouble for the Empire? And because they left, Reva is the only one who can find Bale's message to Obi-Wan. The one that the scam Jedi lost? The really important one? It's pretty lucky that only Reva saw it, though. If Vader saw it, Bale, Leia, Owen, Beru, Luke, they'd all be dead. And if that happened, then the original trilogy couldn't happen. It's not like Raver's gonna do anything with this information. Her goal is killing Vader, right? I mean, after being stabbed in the gut, that's not gonna change. If anything, Raver wants to kill Vader even more now. This information's kinda useless for her, because it won't help her achieve that. Honestly, it's a pretty weird choice for Episode 5 to end on this. I mean, why did this even happen? I can't envision a way that it could ever come back. And that, my friends, is what we in the business call foreshadowing. Episode 6 opens with the Rebel ship trying and failing to dodge fire from the Star Destroyer that's following behind it. It's actually pretty funny to watch them try and serpentine their way out of this. And I have to ask, how can the Rebel ship survive this? This is like a tugboat versus a battleship. In fact, no, it's so much worse. This is an aircraft carrier. Star Destroyers have tons of TIE fighters on board. They should be deploying them. Not to mention the Rebels' shields should be toast. Or are you telling me that a Star Destroyer doesn't have the firepower to take down a civilian transport's shields? And what about the tractor beam? The Tantive 4 was captured by a Star Destroyer. The same should be happening here. On board the Rebel ship, everything is pretty chill. No panicking, no worries. I mean, it's a miracle they're not destroyed, but it doesn't look like it. I mean, it should be on, like, red alert or something. It's quiet enough that they can have conversations. Whispered conversations. Kenobi posits that they don't have a backup, so they have to come up with a plan on the fly. Now, this is bad, but not awful. If the plan they come up with is reasonable and makes sense. Problem is, it doesn't. Kenobi thinks that if he leaves on their only escape pod, that will draw Vader and consequently the Star Destroyer away. There is no way that he can think this will work. If Kenobi leaves on the last escape pod, it will not distract the entire Star Destroyer. They'll maybe send a fighter or two after it, but it will not distract the entire Star Destroyer. Remember, this is the equivalent of an aircraft carrier. The way this is framed, it just looks like Obi-Wan's trying to find a way to ditch the Rebels. Like he's leaving them for dead. Like he's abandoning them. Like he's running away. Yet again. It's at this point we get an emotional moment between Leia and Kenobi. An emotional moment where they solidify their relationship. You know, the one that never comes up again. And he passes on Tala's iconic holster to her. You know, the one that she never wears again after this episode. I mean, this is the quintessential meaningless moment. I can't believe this happened. It never comes up again. Think about A New Hope. Leia shows zero attachment to Kenobi. The closest their relationship gets is when she said,
General Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars.
Then, when Obi-Wan dies, Leia comforts Luke. She never even sheds a tear. Yet we're supposed to believe that Leia and Kenobi had this really meaningful relationship only 10 years prior. It just doesn't check out.
Whether he dies or I do, this ends today.
Yeah, about that. There's this thing called the original trilogy. So, oops. So, remember that plan, Kenobi's plan that I brought up earlier? The one that I explained why there's no way he can think it'll work? Guess what happens? It actually works, somehow. You know, I'm starting to think that Vader's helmet is on too tight. Like, legitimately. He decides to stop following the Rebel ship and to focus the Star Destroyer on Kenobi. A Star Destroyer is an aircraft carrier. It has fighters on it, but guess what? It also has other spacecraft. Like, say, Vader's own personal ship. Vader doesn't even need to send fighters after Kenobi. If he really, really, really wants to personally hunt Kenobi down, he can just send his own ship. Even more maddeningly, he actually does do this. When Kenobi lands his escape pod on the rock planet, Vader follows him. And Vader doesn't land in the Star Destroyer, because I don't even know if that thing can land. He leaves in his own personal ship, essentially leaving the Star Destroyer just floating in orbit, doing sweet FA. Meaning, he could have separated from the Star Destroyer at any time and chased Kenobi on his own. Now, if Vader had just walked out of the bridge saying, "Continue the pursuit," leaving the people on the bridge to comment how he left to chase the pod on his own, that could have been a pretty cool scene. But no, because Kenobi's plan was to sacrifice himself to distract the whole Star Destroyer and save the rebels, it works. It just works. Even though it has no right to. So here we see Obi-Wan standing outside of his ship waiting for Vader to follow him. Which Vader does, and when he arrives, he says,
"Have you come to destroy me, Obi-Wan?"
"Dude, you came to me!" Okay, let's be honest. I think we all know why this line is here. It's clearly because they wanted to do a callback to Revenge of the Sith. But if you're gonna do it, you could at least put some effort in. In context, this line makes no sense. Not coming from Vader, and not in this scenario. It's so blatantly shoehorned in because they wanted a please clap moment. Now, the fight choreography is as bad as good as it was in Episode 3, by which I mean not at all. They fight in the dark, again, on a flat plane, again. There's very shaky camera work. It's hard to see what's happening. A lot of quick cuts. You get the picture. But here's the thing. What makes this so bad is that before the series released, there was all this boasting about choreography, lofty promises that were not kept. It just makes this doubly embarrassing. If we compare to Mustafar again, clear direction, quick technical choreography, a lot of interesting set pieces, and the score tied the whole thing together. Say what you will about the characters or the story, the Mustafar fight looked good. It sounded good. It felt good. Whereas this fight, it looks, ridiculous as being generous. To call it amateurish would be an insult to all the amazing fan-made lightsaber fights out there. This fight comes across as if they weren't even trying. And yeah, even though Obi-Wan completely lost to Vader a few episodes ago, not only is he going to be able to hold his own in this fight, he's going to trounce Vader by the end. That could work if there had been some kind of arc, if maybe he relearned some skills he'd forgotten. But because we haven't gotten any of that, this whole fight feels hollow. It's obvious. This had to happen to justify that line from A New Hope.
"When I left you, I was but a learner."
But there's ways to earn this payoff. Ways that haven't been explored or even attempted by this show. You're just expected to accept it, and it really upsets me how many people just did. Vader trips up Obi-Wan with rocks. Big rocks, being thrown straight at his ankles. Ow! That could do some serious damage. I'm surprised that didn't break his legs. But, thanks to that aforementioned plot armor, Kenobi's completely fine. Vader breaks apart the Earth with the Force, which is ridiculously powerful, and as Obi-Wan falls into the pit, Vader crushes him with massive rocks. So I guess he's dead then? Nah, of course not. Of course Kenobi isn't dead. We know he's gonna survive this. But I wouldn't blame you if you thought he was dead. Any character without plot armor would be. Then Vader lectures what he assumes is Obi-Wan's corpse. Why? I don't know. I think it's hilarious. But I don't know why the writers put it in there. You're probably wondering the big question. How did Kenobi survive? Well, he thought about Leia for a bit. Remember Luke Skywalker? He was supposed to be a big thing for Kenobi, right? Supposed to care a lot about him. So Obi-Wan force pushes his way out of his rock grave thanks to the newfound inspiration he got from thinking about Leia. It's very reminiscent of that scene from Homecoming, just without all the stuff that made that scene from Homecoming good, like the setup and the context and the struggle. It's like that, but without the good bit. And after all this, which you'd assume might make some noise, he just somehow sneaks up behind Vader. Then Obi-Wan does the coolest thing I've ever seen any character do in a Star Wars series or movie or cartoon. He asserts his dominance by doing a T-pose. And I guess he throws some boulders at Vader too, using the Force. But that's not something he can do. He's never had a feat like that before, or like since. It's just not something he should be capable of. But like, yes, whatever. Doesn't matter. The Force is just space magic now. It used to mean something. It doesn't anymore. It's not even like he does any like hand gestures, which is normally what Force users do when they're doing something difficult. They've got to like wave their hands about a bit. But like, no, he's just T-posing. Now, these boulders, they're like flying at and hitting and breaking apart against Vader. And like somehow he's still alive and still standing. Like, geez, what is his armor made of? It's not even like Vader couldn't be able to stop these with the Force or anything. But he just doesn't. Just lets himself get pelted. Could possibly survive. At least not without his infinite plot armor, that is. Kenobi hits Vader with the butt of his lightsaber. Truly the smartest part of your lightsaber to hit your enemy with. And then he gets blindsided in the head with a boulder. Flippin' heck. Vader just sucks now. It's only because it needs to happen for the plot, but it's really unsatisfying. Then, the show starts ripping off Rebels. That's right, Star Wars Rebels. Everyone's favorite Star Wars show. That's the one that everyone talks about, right? They talk about how much they like Rebels. Well, they just kind of take a scene from it and remake it, but swap out Ahsoka for Obi-Wan. And, I mean, come on. Like, seriously? If we think about this lore-wise, it's super embarrassing for Vader to have had this happen to him twice. And then, if we think about it meta-wise, it's super embarrassing that the writer was incapable of coming up with an original idea. It's a lose-lose scenario. Any way you slice it, this is really embarrassing. And the following conversation between Anakin and Kenobi is the cherry on the top of this whole awful series. All it's here to do is set up a bunch of lines for A New Hope. Desperately clinging on to some semblance of legitimacy. Some way that we can believe that this is actually a part of the canon. Vader tells Kenobi he killed Anakin, setting up Obi-Wan's conversation with Luke about the same thing. Kenobi says,
Goodbye, Darth.
setting up how he refers to Darth Vader as Darth in A New Hope. Then Kenobi leaves, setting up how Vader is still alive in A New Hope. I mean, this is so forced. It's like watching a child try to put those shapes through the holes, and they're really trying to force a square into a triangle. It's like watching that. Kenobi came here with the intention of killing Darth Vader. He said as much earlier in the episode. Yet, even though he's clearly in position to kill him, he just leaves. I'd ask why, but we know why. It's so that Vader can be in the OT. But there's a problem. Actions speak a lot about your character. And Kenobi's actions are saying some bullshit. Think about it. Obi-Wan is sparing Darth Vader after witnessing his tyranny firsthand. We know he comes to the conclusion that Vader is beyond redemption, so there is no justifiable reason for letting Vader live. And it's not like he meant to let Anakin live on Mustafar either, by the way. He left believing Anakin was dead. The fact that he doesn't kill Vader means that everything Vader does beyond this point, all the Jedi he hunts, all the innocents he kills and tortures, all of it is now partially Kenobi's fault because he deliberately spared him, despite knowing Vader's intentions. This doesn't work with Kenobi's established character, and it can't happen. Since this is the last time we'll see him, now's probably a good time to talk about Vader. Specifically, about what a disservice this show has done to him. From his mannerisms to his delivery, Vader is quite literally a shadow of his original trilogy counterpart. You'd be forgiven in thinking that James Earl Jones reprised his role as Vader, but it's actually an AI voice program. Now it becomes really obvious when you compare the delivery, as the AI is much more monotone. As a result, it takes away a lot of Vader's emotion as a character. As for his character, Vader in this series is inept. His killing of random civilians who were probably loyal to the Empire, his plan to use Reva to get to Kenobi, and his choice to follow Kenobi instead of splitting up to follow both of them, they're all concave-brained at best. It's genuinely upsetting to see one of the most iconic villains in history reduced to this. How anyone can think this series does the character justice is frankly beyond me. Now, Kenobi just flies away off planet, but to me that begs a question. Where's the Star Destroyer? Last we saw, it was floating above the planet on Vader's command. But I guess it's gone now? Otherwise, why wouldn't they shoot down Kenobi's ship as soon as he tries to leave? Now, if Vader and the Star Destroyer had split up earlier, like I suggested, this would be fine, but they didn't. Right now, the Star Destroyer is supposed to be idling in space, waiting for Vader to return after killing Kenobi. But they're absolutely nowhere to be seen when Kenobi escapes. So I guess the writers forgot. Again. So the episode started with Reva teleporting, and it wasn't like all the other little Force teleports that have been happening. She didn't cross a room or appear in front of somebody she was behind. She just poofed across the galaxy. From Jabeam to Tatooine. I mean, it's the only explanation too. It's not like there's any other transport, and her travel time is non-existent. She just arrives there. She hasn't even had time to treat her lightsaber wound either. She's limping around like an invalid. How the hell did she get here? Now that alone, that's a big problem. But the next problem I'm going to bring up is even worse. Never mind how did she get here, why is Reva here? Reva finds out about Luke and just immediately goes to kill him? Why? She's got no reason to. This doesn't align with her pre-established goals. How exactly will this help her kill Vader? Keep in mind, she doesn't know this is Vader's son. All she knows is that Luke is connected to Bail and Obi-Wan. She doesn't even know how or to what extent. So, is this supposed to be revenge on Obi-Wan? Why would she want revenge on Obi-Wan? He did exactly what she wanted. He set her up with the alley-oop. It's not his fault she flubbed it. Maybe she's trying to do this to re-ingratiate herself with the Empire. But how would that work? They don't even know about Luke. And, I mean, you tried to kill Darth Vader. Dude's notoriously unforgiving. I honestly have no clue what this move is. Why is she here? What does she want? The only answer I have left is she's here because the writers want her to be here. We'll find out why in a bit. Owen has warned about Reva, and he has the pretty sensible plan of just leaving. Beru, on the other hand...
We need to leave, Beru. We need to take Luke and hide somewhere.
Where? In the desert? I'm not leaving my home. At least here we have a chance.
See, Beru wants to defend the Moisture Farm and Luke with Owen against a Sith Inquisitor. This is monumentally dumb. They stand no chance. Reva has the Force, even injured, which they don't know about. And alone, which they also don't know about. She can just ragdoll them both to death. Both Beru and Owen should know this. Their only choice is to leave. But here's the thing, they can't. Because that would affect the OT. So, the writers need to find some way to make them stay here despite this scenario that they've forced into happening. And Beru has to come up with this amazing plan.
She'll come when the suns go down. Best we get positioned now.
So let me get this straight. Beru predicts that Raver will come at night, so they should hide with guns and ambush her. Flawless logic. Well, except this relies on Raver coming at night. Why would she do that? That's, like, the worst time for her to attack. I'm sorry, Raver's weapon of choice is a big, glowy sword. I think that gives away her position in the dark. So attacking during the night would put her at a major disadvantage. She'd be highly visible. From Raver's perspective, it makes much more sense to attack during the day, when she isn't at a disadvantage. So, Beru's conclusion doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, it works, sure, but it shouldn't. The only reason it works is because the writers are just as dumb as Beru. Owen and Beru know their duty is to raise Luke. And Luke is one of the most important children in the galaxy. They should already have prepared some kind of backup plan. You know, just in case something like this happens. I mean, anything else would be irresponsible as hell. 2 moisture farmers versus a Sith Inquisitor? That's the most one-sided death battle I've ever seen. Raver would completely destroy them. Heck, stormtroopers do destroy them in 10 years' time. Remember the crispy bodies by the door? The only reason things happen the way they do, Beru and Owen staying, holding their own against Raver, not being injured or killed, it's because if things played out the way that they should, it would significantly contradict A New Hope. If they die here or move from here, they can't be living here 10 years later. So in order to keep the story consistent in having Owen and Beru stay here and live here 10 years later, they need to have Owen and Beru act inconsistently. I can't believe it. They've somehow managed to ruin Owen and Beru. I honestly never expected there'd be a day when I thought that, but here we are. We didn't need to be here. Frankly, I'm still not sure why we are here. Now, Owen's plan for Luke, if he and Beru die, is to run. Run into the desert. I'm sure nobody's died from running into the desert before, right? Raver, Owen, and Beru fight. Just like the Kenobi-Vader fight. It's dark and shaky and hard to tell what's going on, but from what I can tell, everyone sucks. I mean, what happened to those positions Owen and Beru were supposed to get in? They don't even try to pincer Raver or anything. You know, position one in front and one behind so that, you know, when you shoot Raver, it's not like she can block from both directions at the same time. They just stand next to each other. They don't take advantage of their superior numbers at all. No coordinated shooting either. It's just a free-for-all. A free-for-all that they somehow survive. You know, we've seen Force users fight enemies with blasters before, right? Normally they deflect the blaster bolts back or use the Force to throw them. None of that here, though. I mean, every character in this fight except for Raver is protected by A New Hope. Meaning that even though Lars and Beru should be dead, they can't die.
You really love the boy. Like he's your own.
He is my own.
That is such a Chad line. In a better show, that would be a highlight for me. But here it's meaningless. Because it's completely unearned.
What do you want?
Justice.
How is killing Luke justice? Justice is a very loaded word. It has a very significant meaning that just doesn't apply here. Even if she knew that he was Vader's son, which she doesn't, killing him, just like Vader killed so many children before, isn't justice, it's revenge. This is a really twisted interpretation of justice. They better not try to redeem her after this. Then Raver chases Luke, you know, to run him down and kill him. Just keep that in mind throughout this. That said, the fact that Luke is even aware he's being chased by Raver and Inquisitor breaks so much. Raver uses the Force on Luke, which can't happen. And Luke falls off a cliff and bumps his head on a rock, potentially killing him already. And because of this, Obi-Wan finally senses something. But I gotta be honest, I don't know how. I mean, this is happening on the other side of the galaxy from him. So, I mean, what even is the range on this kind of stuff? I don't know. I didn't think it was this large. But thanks to this sense, he finally starts heading for Tatooine. I mean, I would have assumed he was heading there anyway after the whole Vader thing, but I guess he was just idling in space for a bit? Now, something to remember. This whole time, Obi-Wan is supposed to have been guarding Luke, above everything else. That's his mission. Every action he takes must be observed through that lens. Yet, he hasn't thought about Luke for most of this series. His actions, or rather lack of consideration, has directly led to Luke being put in danger. That's incredibly irresponsible. And it's completely out of character for Kenobi. Now let's be honest. From the other side of the galaxy, there's no way that Kenobi can get to Tatooine in time. Except the plot needs him to be there. So he does. He just teleports there, I guess. Man, this galaxy, it just feels smaller and smaller with each new show, with each new installment. Remember when using the hyperdrive used to take significant time? Yeah, but I guess it doesn't work like that anymore. I mean, in Mandalorian Season 2, he got from one solar system to another without even having to use hyperdrive. He got there in like 3 days. How small is the Star Wars universe? Like how close together are the solar systems? How close together are the planets? Like, it seems like travel time has just disappeared. Just as Reva is about to stab a kid, she gets flashbacks to the time that she got stabbed as a kid, which spurs her on to break the cycle and to stop all of the kid stabbing. How noble of her. Reminds me of The Last of Us 2. I mean, it's not like she ever had a reason to stab kids anyway. It's confirmed. Reva is officially redeemed. Except, that's not really enough to redeem her, is it? Let's think back to all of the bad things she's done throughout this series. From her aggressive pursuit of Jedi, to that time she tried to torture Leia, not to mention all of the work she's done for the Empire. Yeah, I'm sorry. One action is not enough to redeem a lifetime of evil. This isn't even an action. It's inaction. Because she didn't kill Luke, she's redeemed? Not doing something bad isn't worthy of praise. Yet, when she carries Luke back, all is forgiven. Thanks, Reva. We know you tried to kill us and our son, but ultimately, you didn't. So we forgive you. What a load of crap. Kenobi gives her a pep talk and she throws away her lightsaber, even though those things are really rare and valuable and useful. But whatever. It's a red lightsaber, so it's evil. Get rid of it. Reva is probably the most baffling character in this show. She's inconsistent, erratic, unstable. Thing is, she's not supposed to be any of these things. It really feels like she was written on the fly. She acts however she needs to act for the scene. Honestly, I'm most perplexed by her motivation. The whole show, her goal has been to kill Vader. That doesn't explain pretty much any of the things she does. Why hunt Jedi so aggressively and with such passion? Why kidnap Leia? And most importantly, why was she trying to kill Luke? None of it adds up. In the epilogue of the series, we see Leia putting on her iconic holster. You know, the one she never wears again. And her parents just let her keep it. They're surprisingly cool with letting their child walk around with a holster. Then again, this just speaks to how crap Leia's parents are, which pretty consistent. They're consistently bad parents. I don't think they were intended to be consistently bad parents, but that's how they're characterized.
If I'm going to do this, I'm going to want to change a few things.
Shut up, child. Your opinion means spit. Leia is an interesting character. In the OT. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying she's a good character in Kenobi. God, she sucks in Kenobi. She's awful. Real bad. Thing is that since the OT, like the rest of the cast, she's suffered from her fair share of Flanderization. But Kenobi does something different. Because Kenobi features a 10-year-old Leia. So you might expect her to be an inkling of what she will become. She may have characteristics that evolve, traits that develop. Young Leia should be a pre-evolution of her OT counterpart. She should grow into what she's going to become. Yet, this show seems absolutely determined to write her like she's already there. Combine that with her spouting off the writer's opinions left, right, and center. It's pretty embarrassing. Especially because these worldly observations are not nearly as clever as the writer thinks. And when they're coming from a child, they're just laughable. Kenobi surprises Leia on Alderaan, blowing his cover. Again. And connecting himself with Bail. Again. Seriously, Bail being friends with Jedi must be an open secret at this point, let alone his involvement with the rebellion. How is he not in prison? Or dead? Throughout this show, Bail Organa is presented, intentionally or not, as an idiot. He's incompetent, weak, ineffectual, all traits that would make him a poor politician and a poor leader, which is exactly why they're not traits I believe he'd possess.
But we must be careful. No one must know, or it could endanger us both.
Remember, make sure to act like you don't know me, so that this show can still have our relationship in the OT. You know, the one where you act like you've never met me and have only heard about me from your father. It's so ham-fisted, they're not even trying to hide it at this point. The series ends with Kenobi back on Tatooine. Owen finally lets him meet Luke. Oh yeah, Luke's a character. I honestly would forgive you for forgetting he's in the show. Despite the fact that Obi-Wan's mission is to protect Luke, aside from this episode, Luke's pretty irrelevant to the story. I mean, sure, I'd rather you not directly involve Luke in any of the events that are happening here. I mean, I would rather you just leave Luke alone and never touch him again. Please? But that just can't happen in this show, not when Luke's safety should be on Obi-Wan's mind all the time. As for what we actually do get of Luke, I don't buy it. Luke from A New Hope didn't come across to me like he'd been attacked by a Sith Inquisitor. Neither did Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru seem like they fought off a Sith Inquisitor. Like a lot of this show, just doesn't fit in with what's already established. It reads like bad fan fiction. Kenobi says the line,
Hello there.
And everything effectively goes back to the way it was. Assuming there's no season 2, right? They wouldn't make a second season of this, would they? Just before the episode closes, Force Ghost Qui-Gon shows up for a cameo, which isn't uncommon for Disney shows at this point. They always close with some kind of cameo or teaser. I mean, I'm surprised they were able to hold off this long. However, there's a problem. This breaks canon. Qui-Gon isn't supposed to be able to fully Force Ghost. At best, he can communicate from the other side, but he's not able to fully manifest, because, in universe, Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon before he could complete the training required to Force Ghost. So this cool little cameo can't happen. It's just another case of sacrificing continuity for the sake of a cool scene. Also, the fact that Qui-Gon only chooses to manifest now, that effectively assassinates his character. This is just the worst place that you could put Qui-Gon in this show. Like, there's so many better opportunities. Any time that, like, Obi-Wan is meditating, or that bit when he gets trapped underneath all the rocks by Vader earlier in the same episode. So many choices, and you chose this? Really? Ugh. So, that was Kenobi. So it took me over a year to finish this. I think I might have missed the Kenobi hype train a bit. But, if you made it this far, you probably have an opinion on the video, so feel free to voice that in the comments. Gonna make more videos, shorter videos probably. Gonna try and release them a little bit quicker too. Also, I'm thinking about streaming at some point, so you should probably subscribe if you're interested in any of that and you want to keep up.